So I look around the room and I see God looking back at me. I see love looking back at me. Light, love, life, peace, power, beauty, joy. All of these things and all the parts that make them up are what we might call, and I call, God or Spirit, source of all that is, source of all that is. No spot where that isn't. And we turn our eyes to and our consciousness to knowing that we are that light when we light the candle. But it's always there. That source of all there is what powers me, what powers each of us. I am not God doesn't love me. God is love through me. Spirit doesn't give me peace. Spirit is peace through me. To the extent that I'm willing to be that, to the extent that I'm willing to open myself to it, I am that. We are each that. It's a choice to be open to expressing the wonder and amazement that is Spirit flowing freely through, in and as each of us. We are not separate in any way except in our consciousness. But in the reality of it all, we are one. Just breathe that in. We are one being, one thing, with many, many, many individualizations, we could say, many uniquenesses, many differences, but still all one thing. We are, each of us, experiencing Spirit through the way we are. I'm grateful to know this. I'm grateful to feel this peace, this comfort of knowing I can't do anything wrong. I might do it poorly, but it's not wrong. It's just doing it. I know I am God in flesh. I am Spirit walking, and I know I need do nothing to deserve that love that is Spirit. I say the only reason I have any deserving at all is because I'm breathing, and I suspect that it's still all Spirit, even those things that don't breathe. There is no spot that love, light, life, peace, power, beauty, and joy does not exist. It is all one thing. Today I celebrate with each of these unique representations of Spirit, connection, community, love, life, joy. And we will hear about enlightenment, becoming the light, and allowing something new to show up in the room. I am grateful for this allowing, this welcoming. So I say yes. And on behalf of everyone who can hear my voice, I say yes even louder. And I let these words go into that law that's already working on the more. Yes, you want more of that? Okay, we can have more of that. We plant yes into the universe, and the universe says, okay. And so it is.
So, but just because there has to be a little bit of tradition at certain times of the year, yes? Last night I was at a concert. Sasha and David, are you guys here? I guess not. Okay. Anyway, I was. Oh, there's David. Hi. We were chatting with some friends of theirs, and somehow or other we all got into realizing that most of us were, as we called it, recovering Catholics. You know, and or as a minister friend of mine says, expanding Catholics. You know, which is something that I like a little bit better. But anyways, so there's a tradition that started in Catholicism of Advent. And I love Advent as a concept because it's the preparation for the birth of something new in our lives. And last month I was talking about the hero's journey, and Advent is sort of a hero's journey. It's a journey through our consciousness from first conception of an idea, of a something that wants to be born, to the actual birth of it. And as within all journeys, there's stages of the journey, yes? There's processes that happen. Yesterday I was interviewed by a person for a New Thought Network radio show talking about my kind of transition, my journey through life. And so if you want to hear an hour-long story of what I'm about, and I'm told that some people really have appreciated it who've listened to it so far, that's available. And it's a journey from sometimes the darkness and the muck to something a little more light, you know. And then you find new darkness and muck to get into, and then you have to journey from that, because it's an eternal journey. So Advent is an eternal process. So last week we talked about the first candle, which is hope. And hope eventually moves into faith. Faith is a certainty, it's a knowingness. And instead of just, I hope this is going to happen, it's having that light of hope and then moving it into more of a certainty, which leads us to today's candle, today's theme, which is peace. And peace is that place that we experience where we know that everything is right. The writer Paul talks about the peace that passes understanding. And what that means is peace is not based on our outer circumstances. Peace is an internal state that we experience. And it's always there, whether we're experiencing it or not. Just like love, it's always there, whether we're experiencing it or not. Right? Yes? So peace is this thing that, when I was young and a little bit of a cynic, I used to say, people were talking about, this Vietnam War was going on. I said, the solution to peace on earth is just kill everybody off, and then we'll be peaceful. And there was a truth to that, based on outer circumstances, but it wasn't exactly really what was being called for, right? So peace is this inner knowingness that's not dependent on what's happening in my life. And here's the thing, when I'm at peace within, I start to create from peace, and it expresses out. When I'm in the consciousness of love, I start to create from love, and that's what shows up more of in my life. And so it's an invitation this week to move into a place of peace, to remember and experience and then express that peace that lives within and as each of us. It's already there. You don't have to make it happen. And we just tune into the channel, if you will, of peace that is already playing within us. So I invite you as we move through this Advent. And by the way, if you want, I do a weekly message for Advent on Sunday mornings. And if you would like to get a weekly email, there's a link on our website that you can sign up for to get it. So then our talk series this month is hang on a second here, is embracing the light and the dark. I love this time of year because both are so present, aren't they? Yeah. Some people say especially the dark. It depends on what you focus on. When I grew up in Portland, Oregon, and I had moved away and came back, and I had a couple friends who were from Phoenix, Arizona, who were co-workers with me, and Phoenix is a little different weather pattern than here. You may have noticed, and so my friend was saying, God, I miss the sun, and I said, and I was a photographer at the time, and I was very attuned to light, to to the play of light and what it looked like. And I said, notice the different shades of gray in the sunset as the sun is setting. And at first, my friend was just sitting there going, shades of gray. And about a year or two later, she said, I see what you mean. I was paying attention, and there is this light. Behind the darkness of the clouds, there is this light. We call it a dark, cloudy day outside perhaps right now, but it's light. Yes? Yeah? So this light is always present. And so we're going to play with the embracing the light and the dark, celebrating the light and the dark, and we're going to begin with light. Right? There's this book called Genesis in a book called the Bible. Some of you has anybody read that book? I think it might have been on the New York Times bestseller list a long time ago, I'm not sure. But it starts off by saying, in the beginning, God said, let there be light. Let there just be light. And I always laugh because it actually says, there was the earth was formless and without form and dark and all this stuff. So it wasn't really the beginning when light hit, right? There was something there before. Yes? There was something else there before. But in the beginning, let there be light. And this light was not physical light. The sun, moon, and stars wouldn't be created until 4 days, periods, whatever, later. So this is a light of consciousness. This is a light of seeing internally. It's the beginning of life out of potential. The unconscious or the darkness is the potential. Not realized, but it's there. The original state of darkness was potential. Hang on a second, my program did something silly here. I have just started using a computer to do this, and once in a while it does strange things. So the original state of darkness was potential. It was receptive, but not active or activated. We all have that state within us, yes? We all have within us some things that are just kind of sitting in the dark, and they could use a little light to activate themselves, right? Yeah? And so that's what this first start is there's something, this light, whatever we want to consider it, not a physical light, a light of consciousness that activates something out of our darkness. Thomas Troward, who was an early New Thought writer in the early 1900s, a major influence on Ernest Holmes, defines life, L-I-F-E, as the animating principle of being, the animating principle of being. And it's the second aspect of the divine, which is the desire is to express or share life, which he calls love. Buffy kind of ran through all these 7 main aspects that he talks about in the opening prayer. And so it starts with life, kind of got to start with life, yes? Otherwise there's nothing else. Kind of just very practical. And then the second aspect of the divine is to share that life, to express that life, which is called love. And then the third aspect of the divine he defines as light, which is the ability to see. Just a second here. I'm still having strange things with my programming. Yes. I don't want to go back to paper. I do not want to go back to paper. I can do this. No, it's not Denny's help. It's just bouncing around in places. So, but it's the ability to see. Troward says it's the primary all-inclusive perception of boundless manifestations yet to be. Those who know Thomas Troward will recognize that writing style. The primary all-inclusive, nothing excluded, all-inclusive perception of boundless manifestations of the infinite possibilities that could ever be. Right? You and I can't conceive of that. We have some aspect of that, right? We can all see more than what already is, yes? I was talking with a friend yesterday who was very disappointed over something that was happening in their life. And I said, the very fact that you're disappointed of that means that you know that there's something better possible. You're just not seeing it yet. Oftentimes we have to understand what we don't want in order to get to what we do want. And we have to go through that darkness of disappointment to get to that. So these manifestations, these possibilities exist, but they're not seen in the darkness. When the Buddha attained enlightenment, and tomorrow is Bodhi Day, we celebrate the enlightenment of the Buddha in many countries. When the Buddha achieved enlightenment, he saw all of his lifetimes. All of his lifetimes. It's like that perception, that vast perception. And we let that light show up for us. Buffy occasionally refers to a little phrase that comes out of New England called "the light dawns over Marblehead." And it's kind of a little play on words. Marblehead, Massachusetts is a little spit of land that goes out into the Atlantic, and it's the first point where the light of the new day lands in that region. But it also, we sometimes feel like we have a Marblehead. Anybody besides me? Kind of a little solid, you know? Okay. And so finally light dawns on it. Oh, and it's an expression that means, oh, I suddenly see something that I hadn't seen before. So light, according to Troward, allows us to experience the pure perception of the law of infinite possibility. In other words, there is infinite possibility. It already exists, but we start to perceive it more and more and more and more as we move into more and more and more of our own light. Yes? So the writer of Genesis believed that light is the originating principle of life. Let there be light, and from there everything comes. Everything comes from that light. Physicists today would tell us that all matter is gravitationally trapped light and energy. Mm-hmm. Nudge your neighbor and just say, "You're a bundle of light." You're just gravitationally trapped light or light energy. And that light is the source of all life on earth. So when Jesus said both, "I am the light of the world," and he also said, "And you are the light of the world," don't hide your light under a basket, right? So it wasn't, "Hey, I am and you're not." It's, "Yeah, we all are." It's an inclusive message. It's true both literally, both physically, as well as metaphorically. So let's look at light from a different viewpoint. Let's look at it from Taoist cosmology. I know that Kent is going to love this one. Danny, can you do that first little slide? There we go. So this is the original version of what's called the Taijitu. We call it the yin-yang symbol in the West. And it's slightly different than the one we're used to because it has that little center circle. And that center circle represents the central pole of the Tao itself. The infinite, undefinable way, as my friend Tim calls it, the ineffable singularity that is beyond words, beyond description, beyond knowing, but it is. And the Taoists have a different cosmology than, say, we do in the West. In the West, it was based on a hierarchical. There's God up there, and then there's a layer of angels, and then there's us, and then there's the animals, and then there's the rocks. Hierarchical level. The Taoists have an expansive from central understanding of a cosmology. And so there's this infinite, ineffable singularity of the Tao, the way, the path, the process. And it eventually moves into form. It takes action. It becomes active. That's represented by the white part of that there. It's called the yang energy. Or in the West, yang energy, but it's really yang in Chinese. And so it's this movement that comes out of this polarity. It's this movement that comes from this. So from that infinite oneness, that what Troward calls the self, capital S self-contemplation, comes this movement. It moves. And it moves until it's complete, until it's finished with whatever it's moving into. And then from there, it moves into the state of yin, quiet, rest, inactivity. And then when that's complete, it does what? Starts again, becomes active. And it's this polarized movement, this polarity of movement, not polarized in the way that we as a society are being polarized, I'm right and you're wrong, but polarity, as in the poles of a magnet. It's this movement that creates. And then out of this polarity comes something that the Chinese call the five essences, the five phases, where in the West they're called the five elements, which are wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. In that order when they're working properly. And then out of those 5 elements and the combination and the flowing together of all that come what the Chinese call the 10,000 things. In other words, everything else. But it all starts with this movement at the center of light and dark. And we'll explore that idea more next week, but it's important to note that yin and yang, movement and rest, light and dark, are both necessary for life. We embody this every single day when we do what? Sleep and wake. Sleep and wake. Part of the problems many people encounter in our society is we spend too much time in yang energy. Going yang, 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 gotta do, be active. And then we try to carry that into our yin energy, sleep, and we can't sleep very well because we're still yanging away. Right? They're both necessary. They're mutually reinforcing. They are codependent. And by codependent, I'm not talking about the relationship nature of, that, but interdependent, depending upon each other. And this concept is also present in another place, and that's the next slide, if you will, Denny, which is what Ernest Holmes uses as the diagram for the creative process that we teach here, where the upper section is the yang, the active energy, the activity of the universal mind or light, and the middle is the yin, or the subjective mind, which is acted upon by the mind of light. Buffy referred to that just a moment ago in the prayer as planting the seed. It's the soil in which we plant the seed. The planting of the seed is the yang energy. The soil in which the seed is planted, nurtured, and grows through its own process is the yin energy, and the result is automatic, the form itself. When you put these two together, something automatically happens, something automatically must come out of it. What we teach is to be conscious of what are we putting into the yin, the soil, yes? Because if I put in, I believe I'm worthless and I'm going to be poor and unloved the rest of my life, as Buffy likes to say, the law just simply says, yeah, how much of that do you want? And if we put in, I'm fabulous, the law says, yes, how much of that do you want? It's the only thing it says, by the way. Always saying yes. So we teach the personal use of the creative process. The personal use of the creative process, which is an impersonal process that we can apply personally. We can apply it for ourselves. Yes? When we teach Qigong or Tai Chi, it's a personal use of the Tai Chi process. By personal use, I mean you and I are embodying it, right? It's out there, it's completely available. It's like electricity. It's a principle that's completely available for anybody to use in any way, at any time, and any how they want to. And we can sit there and go, yeah, I know there's electricity, but I'm not going to use it. Why am I in the dark? We can be like primitive people. Did the principle of electricity exist 5,000 years ago? A principle of electricity existed 5,000 years ago. Nobody knew how to use it. It wasn't until we gained the knowledge of how to use it and apply it. So we personally use this creative process. And it can be applied personally by those who recognize, learn, and work with these principles and processes, or what we call laws. And the first step is to turn to the light. That is to let go of our limited perspective and connect with that mind that sees more fully, more expansively, more brightly. When we get our, as Emerson calls it, bloated nothingness out of the way, and we can start to see from a larger perspective. How many of us have gone through life and we think it's this way, and all of a sudden something happens and it wakes us up and we go, oh my God, I could have had a V8 all along, right? There's something new that happened. Some of you are younger, don't remember the ad of I could have had a V8, but it's like I could have had a different experience than the painful, limited, frustrating one I'm having. And so what we believe is all that can be. What we believe. But I'm absolutely certain, if I believe that only this is possible, then guess what? I'm right. There's an old saying, argue for your limitations and they're yours. So, as we expand, we turn to an infinite principle that is not bound by precedent. In other words, what came before, it's not that the possibility isn't limited to only recreating what came before, what has been before. But that mind that is greater sees far more possibilities, far more potential outcomes, and importantly, the how to bring them into being, into form. Because the means always accompanies the idea. The how to make it happen always accompanies the idea. Last week I quoted Rumi, who said, as you start to walk the path appears. And oftentimes we don't even start to walk on the path because we don't know how to make the vision we have possible. But if we just start on the path, the way to do it will become possible. I talked about yesterday in my little interview that my second wife and I wanted to go to ministerial school. And we didn't have the $50,000 we knew it was going to take for the two of us over 4 years to go through this program. At least we didn't think we had the $50,000. And so, but we said yes anyways. And so we were at working with a financial planner, and it was kind of funny because my wife was in tears, having a big cathartic, crying moment of, we don't have enough money, and I don't even think we can keep the condo and blah, all this. And she had a $250,000 retirement account that was the result of her first divorce that her husband had given her as to kind of say, done. And so the financial planner is looking at all the paperwork involved in this. She's watching my wife having this crying fit, and she's looking at me as I'm kind of watching my wife have this crying fit. And she's, and I can clearly see in her mind that's like, what is she so upset about? And finally she gets through with the thing and is ready to talk. And she goes, well, there's some cash that's not sitting in an IRA or any other way that's limited and not available, and it's $50,000. Just unassigned cash in this retirement fund. The exact amount of money that we needed is just sitting there. We didn't know it when we said yes and we need $50,000 to do it. We had to take that first step and say, yes, we're going to do it. Yes, we're going to sign up for it. And have the way reveal itself. Taking a breath. And the purpose of the first step of this spiritual mind treatment, this way that we do prayer here, and the practice of what we call visioning, which is not the same as visualization, is to turn to that infinite mind and remember its light and its life, love, power, peace, beauty, and joy as the real reality, capital R reality, beyond the darkness of the ignorance and conditions. See, we get caught up in the apparent reality of the stuff in our face, yes? We all do it. Nudge your neighbor and say, yes, I sometimes get caught up in, the conditions and how real they look and feel and seem. But the walking of the spiritual path, which is why you're all here, which is what we're all doing together, is to see something more than just the stuff that's right in front of us. Yes? Okay, to see beyond that, to see more, to find enlightenment, to let the light dawn over our marble heads. By the way, marble is beautiful, isn't it? To let something new, something not previously experienced, show up in form. And then the second step of this spiritual mind treatment that we do is to remember that we are already and always one of this infinite light. It's not that I sometimes am and I'm sometimes not. I'm sometimes aware of it more so than others, just like some days are really dark and cloudy, but the sun is still shining, yes? Hasn't affected the sun. So this infinite light is available to us all the time. We are one of this infinite mind of light, just as our bodies are individualized centers of physical light right at the very cellular level. And that our minds are centers of thought, the creative flow of an individualized center of that infinite light, of creativity itself. And this is why we worked with the annual themes, by the way, of growing deeper, rising higher, which we're completing this year as our annual theme, and taking on next year, the idea of beyond our wildest dreams, to remind us of our magnificence, to see something far greater than we've ever seen before, even if right now I don't know what this is. You know, last month we talked about Exodus, and when the Israelites left for the Promised Land, they kind of, well, Moses knew there was a Promised Land. He didn't know what it looked like. He didn't even know exactly where it was. And the Israelites, the people who followed him, had no clue what it looked like. They just took Moses' word for it and kind of got shoved along the way anyway. There's a catch to the light, and that is we must let it in. We must let it in. Next week, we'll explore the darkness as the rich, fertile, creative potential that it is. Darkness also has a connotation of ignorance, of living backwards from the flow of life, and even blocking that flow, at least in the personal shadow. So which is the immediate locality that we are. We can locally block the flow of light, but the light still exists, yes? Okay. We've had millennia of human conditioning that says darkness is bad and evil, but it's not necessarily. So we must make the effort to grow deeper into the truth, letting go of our comfortable certainty in which humanity has been caged. The Buddha didn't come into enlightenment by just hanging out with his buds sipping chai, right? He had to work for it. He had to do something. He had to involve himself in something. And doing the same old thing as everyone else is what keeps us stuck in our current state of however dim the light is in our lives. It takes young activity to create something new, because hanging out in the old will just create more of the old, right? So when in reality we are beings of light, individualized centers of infinite consciousness. Nudge your neighbor. You are a being of light, an individualized center of infinite consciousness. You are a being of light, an individualized center of infinite consciousness. Yes. Me too. Most of you don't have people tell you that most of the time, do you? No. That's why we do this here. That's why we do this here. And yet, so we spread it. We are beings of light with the knowledge and the tools and the ability to create a world both for ourselves and others beyond our wildest dreams. I invite you to let there be light. So this week I invite you to a spiritual practice, to be youngish a bit with your spiritual practice, be actively more into alignment with the infinite mind by connecting with it. Take time to do whatever process you do to connect with that which is higher, greater, more expansive than your limited thinking is. Open the blinds in your mind and let the light in. Ask, what does this mind want to create through me? What does this capital M, this infinite mind, this infinite consciousness want to create through me? How can I be an expression of light today beyond my limited dreams and follow that inspiration? That's the last part of it. Because it's one thing to know the potential of electricity. I got to do something with electricity. I got to plug something in, right? A lot of us notice this with our Christmas lights right about now, yes? You got to plug them in for them to work. So we have to plug in and take action. I know, such a concept, right? And we have to follow that inspiration. And as a hint, there is an intentions retreat coming up in the first weekend of January. And you can sign up for that. I'm going to close with a reading. This is from Sri Aurobindo, who is a Indian philosopher. Ernest Holmes studied him quite a bit. He was somewhat contemporary with Holmes, from his book called The Mind of Light. And he says, a new humanity means for us the appearance, the development of a type or a race of mental beings whose principle of mentality would be no longer a mind in the ignorance, seeking for knowledge, but even in its knowledge bound to the ignorance. a seeker after light, but not its natural possessor. See, when I'm seeking for light, that means I don't think I have it. So I got to go find it. Instead of saying, wait, I already am the light. I already am the infinite wisdom. Someone who is open to the light but not an inhabitant of the light. Not yet a perfected instrument, truth conscious and delivered out of the ignorance. Instead, this new being would be possessed already of what could be called a mind of light, a mind capable of living in the truth, capable of being truth conscious and manifesting in its life a direct in place of an indirect knowledge. Its mentality would be an instrument of the light and no longer of the ignorance. You and I already are that. You and I already are that. We just simply have to wake up to it. And I invite us to wake up. We have an affirmation. Say this with me, if you will, please. I recognize that I am a mind of light, and I live more fully from and as that light. One more time. I recognize that I am a mind of light, and I live more fully from and as that light. So I do, and so it is. Thank you.